Welcome to Mission Oriented, a VeteranCrowd podcast that showcases veteran talent from both the private and public sectors. Their impact is everywhere. We are here to uncover it. Here's your host, Bob Louthan.
Hey, welcome everybody. This is your host, Bob Louthan. This is the Mission Oriented podcast on the VeteranCrowd Network. My guest today, Brendan Duebner, is the founder of Life Skills for Soldiers. He is a former Army artillery officer, spent a lot of time at Fort Bragg, a Wharton grad, came out of the Wharton School as well, and do a shout out to some of our colleagues that we know, Sam Meek and Brandon Shelton, and Mark Delaney and John McCaskill. You guys are out there. These guys have been former guests on the podcast. So Brendan, welcome to the program. Thank you for stepping into the spotlight this afternoon.
No, thank you for having me.
Hey, before we dive into Life Skills for Soldiers, tell me a little bit about growing up and how you decided to join the Army, become an artillery officer.
Yeah, well, I'm from the Bay Area, California, and as you can probably imagine, going into the military is not a usual path. But in retrospect, I think the way I got there is, I'm not from a military family at all, but I did play a lot of very competitive sports growing up. And I think at a certain point in my life, I had to stop playing them. And I think that created this void of wanting to be part of something bigger, something challenging, something where it's about the team. And so I in high school, actually, I told my parents I wanted to enlist in the Marine Corps, and they said, absolutely not. You have to go to college. It is mandatory. But I grew up always hearing about college stories from my dad about his time. He went to Rutgers undergrad, and it sounded like a lot of fun. So I was like, okay, fine. But I only applied to schools with ROTC. Marine Corps doesn't have ROTC, and I did not want to get stuck in the Navy. So that's how I ended up with Army. And, I think growing up in the Bay Area, my family, we never even went camping ever when I was a child. So I think my parents like, this is a phase, he'll get over this. But unfortunately for them, I loved it, did ROTC in college. They wouldn't even let me apply to a service academy, and really enjoyed it. Had phenomenal classmates, a phenomenal experience. And through that, learned about the Army and chose artillery. And here we are.
You were at Fort Bragg. Were you with the 82nd by chance when you were at Fort Bragg?
I was not, actually.
You were not, okay.
Surprisingly,
at Fort Bragg, but not an airborne, not airborne. Okay.
Can you believe it? Yeah. So actually, there's a funny story there. I was actually supposed to go to Germany, with the 173rd, but I had some back issues that I didn't want the Army to know about. So they wanted to send me to the first BOLC a week after college graduation. I said, for undisclosed reasons, I can't do that. So they're like, fine, you're going needs of the Army. And long story short is I ended up going to the 18th Fires Brigade, HIMARS, out at Fort Bragg.
There you go. Hey, later on, I got to ask one other thing because it's something new to me. At my time in the Army was so long ago, the word innovation and Army was probably an oxymoron, but you're an innovation officer with the 75th Innovation Command. Tell me about that, or what you can share about that.
Yeah, that was unexpected for me. Back in 2020, when I put in my refrad and all that to get out and go to business school, I was approached and told, hey, you should join this reserve unit. I was like, nice try. I know what this is all about. Not today. And they're like, no, you really should look into this here. Talk to this person. And long story short is the 75th Innovation Command is all about trying to bridge the gap between the private sector and the military mostly for dual use tech. And they have teams kind of all over the country, including here in the Bay Area. And I think it is still, I think anybody would tell you, it's still not all that it could be. There's still a lot of what you said earlier about innovation and Army can sometimes be challenging, let's say. But I do think it is a step in the right direction, and I enjoy trying to be part of that team to make that happen.
That's great. Did you always want to go to business school? I'm just curious that, Wharton
Mm.
MBA, top program, top 20 program every year.
I had no real thought about some people have these really especially I learned this at Wharton. Some people have these like life plans that are built out like 20 years in advance. And I'm going to graduate from this Ivy and then do banking at this firm and then private equity here. And then I'm going to go to this business school and then I'm going to do XYZ. And, next thing I'm managing director. And that was not the case for me at all. No. Really, in college, I was like, I want to do ROTC. I liked it. I got a scholarship. I was like, okay, I'm going to do the Army. And then, like I said, I had to take some time between graduation and actually showing up to Bullock. And so to fill that time was not only doing rehab for my back, but I was like, okay, well, I should do something else, and I couldn't do a lot of the physical labor that I'd done previous summers. So I just did some Googling and I found out that the GMAT is good for 5 years. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just take this test. If I do well, then, at least I've got an option. And I took the test, fortunately did well. And I was like, okay, well then, business school is now a maybe. And then fast forward a few years, I'm on deployment. It's 2019. I'm thinking like, okay, what's next? What do I want to do when I grow up? And it was between a few different options, and business school was one of them, only really because I had already taken the test. So I would say I kind of fell ass backwards into it.
Well, business school is just a great stop, and I think the business schools actually benefit from people coming out of the military being a part of it. You kind of get blended into the DNA of the class, and I think the schools recognize that. Let's start talking about life skills for soldiers. Tell everybody about life skills for soldiers, what it is, but why. Why did you do this?
Yeah. So Life Skills for Soldiers is a 501c3 nonprofit, and our mission is to improve service members' lives through life skills education. Really, what it's about is using the train the trainer methodology, getting leaders, usually E6 to OT, trained up and give them everything they need to turn around and teach their troops. And where it came from was, when I was a platoon leader, this back in 2016, I show up in my first unit at Bragg, and 3 weeks after I show up, everybody comes back from a heavy deployment to Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. Right, and I'm a little intimidated. I was playing beer pong in college like 6 months before. I was like, what the hell am I going to teach these people? And but something that I quickly realized was, our biggest issues weren't around funding. It wasn't around equipment. It was always around personnel issues. And 95% of the time you dug into those, it was some kind of personal finance problem, some money problem. And I was like, okay, well, this is an opportunity for me. I was that weird kid who I was, 10, 11, 12 years old. For Christmas, I'd ask for stocks. I've always been into personal finance and just understanding how money works. And so I saw a real opportunity. And I was like, okay, I got with my platoon sergeant and I was like, look, like we have a major problem here. What are we going to do about it? And we tried to go to the Soldier Support Center and use the Army resources, but they're not built for this. They're built for, the 100-person class, get everybody in the chapel, and we're gonna go through a PowerPoint. And that was just not what we were looking for. So, my platoon sergeant and I said, like, screw it. We'll just do it ourselves. I use what we do is say, hey, pick a topic, how to make a budget, how to buy a car, or how to use the TSP, whatever it was. My soldiers would pick a topic, and then I would go use my personal finance knowledge and do some research and create kind of a high level class and structure it in a way where it would end with a practical exercise where they would sit down with their section chief, with their NCO, and go through their LES, go through their TSP account, go through credit card statements, whatever the class was about. And what we found was it was phenomenally successful because really my soldiers were much more likely to listen because they were being taught by people they knew and people that they knew they would see over and over and over. Myself and my subordinate leaders had an opportunity to lead and kind of build leadership capital, if you will. And once we were aware of what the problems were and what the goals were, we could help those soldiers stay accountable, which made the soldiers understand, hey, look, like my leaders care about me more than just my PT score or my, how I do at the range. And so it really built this platoon camaraderie. And so we did that. And then, fast forward a few years, I'm on post-deployment leave. I know I'm going to go to business school at this point. And I was like, you know what? That was a really phenomenal experience. So the intent originally was just to just fund it myself, actually, to have a website, take all the classes I'd just put them online, so not every lieutenant or sergeant had to recreate the wheel, and that was just kind of gonna be it. But we got some attention, we got some money, so we could get some software, so we could understand how people were interacting with the product, so we could iterate. So we got more attention, so we got more money, so we got a board, and it's kind of snowballed from there. And yeah, that's really how it got. That's how
This is
we
really
got started.
interesting.
How we're at.
So, as a young person, you were maybe a little Warren Buffett, had a little bit of that in you, but I've always found, and maybe this is what you were alluding to, the 100 person class. I think a lot of times the military has a box to check. Yeah, we did this for our soldiers, right? But they never really put the thought into the results. I mean, that's activity oriented as opposed to result oriented. Is there a story or two that maybe comes to mind of a soldier that you helped as a result of this kind of thing, and what kind of impact that had?
Oh, yeah. There's one immediately that comes to mind. Actually, I had a soldier. I'll change his last name just for privacy stuff. Let's call him Private Luke. Uh, Private Luke was kind of your typical. I think he was 19 years old, um, full of energy, very fit, but he had a lot of disciplinary issues. I think before he came into my platoon, he'd been kicked out of like 3 other ones. He'd been hopping from battery to battery for various issues, and nobody could quite figure it out because he had a lot of potential. He just had disciplinary issues. So we did a budgeting class, and he was going through his monthly spending with his NCO, and what they quickly uncovered was, Private Luke was broke. He was like very broke. And but what was really interesting was like, okay, well, where is your money going? Because he didn't have like the Camaro or the whatever. And what we uncovered was he was spending, I forget the exact dollar amount. It was hundreds of dollars a month on the barracks vending machine. He was just unconsciously every day going down, getting like however many snacks and just spending way too much money on nothing. And when we uncovered that, that's a very easy, simple fix. It's really just bringing the unconscious into the conscious. But for helping helping him see and understand that, like, we probably saved him, let's say, $200 a month, but you would think it was $1 million a month. He was so thankful, and it helped him get out of his money pit, which I think reduced a lot of the stress in his personal life. And long story short is we never had a disciplinary issue with him again. He actually became one of my best soldiers. And I think this is just one example of the plethora of issues out there that are relatively easy to solve, and that have huge effects, not only for service members, but for, units as a whole.
You're listening to the Mission Oriented Podcast on the VeteranCrowd Network. We'll be right back. The Mission Oriented Podcast is sponsored by Transact Capital Partners. Transact Capital Partners is a full-service mergers and acquisitions advisory firm specializing in the confidential sale and acquisition of privately owned mid-tier businesses. At Transact Capital Partners, we believe that our veterans continue to lead impactful lives as civic and business leaders. Their leadership and management skills, hardened in the crucible of the military, are key drivers of success. Veterans are mentally tough team players and creative problem solvers imbued with a heightened sense of ethics and personal accountability. Transact Capital Partners is committed to supporting veteran business owners throughout the life of their companies, building professional relationships and networks, advising on capital formation, mergers, and acquisitions. Contact the veterans on our team, Matt Kane, Ross Harris, and Bob Louthen at transactcapital.com. Hey, welcome back. My guest, Brendan Duebner, founder of Life Skills for Soldiers. Brendan, You guys have a unique approach to training. You're training the trainer. So let's talk a little bit about what that is and why you've chosen to do that.
You know, train the trainer it's so pervasive in everything we do in the military, right? When you're getting ready to go to a range, what do? Train the trainer. When you're getting ready to hold a PT test, what do? Train the trainer. You know, the thought was really just why not apply this same approach, but to personal finance, to money issues, to what I think most people who have spent a day in the military know is a gigantic issue. And so what we do is we know that junior military leaders are the most overburdened people in the military, right? They're pulled in every which direction. There's not enough time in the day. They got a lot of responsibility. And so our thought was, okay, if train the trainer is going to be successful here, what the key task is going to be is to quickly and effectively train up those people and give them everything they need to turn around and teach their troops, right? So it's minimal time cost for them, but get them to a level where they are proficient enough to teach and to help people stay accountable for things. And so that kind of implies two things. One, very careful design of courses and everything, like trim all of the fat. And two is, we're not trying to make anybody an expert in anything. We're not going to teach you Black-Scholes how to price options, right? No, we are just trying to do with personal finance, the first 10% of learning really is like 95% of the results, right? If you can budget effectively and then put that money into like a passive S&P 500 fund or what have you, like that is going to get you most of your results. And so that's what we do. We focus on having bite-sized courses, keeping things very straightforward, and making it very easy for leaders to turn around and teach their people. And we think it's important that we use the leaders, we use the trainer, because personal finance, not that hard. This is not rocket science. You could honestly, you could Google and find any information you need. It's really more of an act of discipline and of staying accountable to goals. And we think the best way to do that is leaders, right? Leaders want to lead. Leaders want to help their people. Leaders have it ingrained in themselves in the military to do so. And oftentimes they're just looking for opportunities to be able to do it. So we think by training up that E6 to O3, bringing them into the loop, helping them teach their troops and understand kind of what their issues are and where what their goals are, that's how you create lasting change. And you don't just have this 1 hour class, you check the block and nothing changes.
Yeah, this is a little bit like my son's in the Navy, he's a naval aviator, and Top Gun. Everybody talks about Top Gun, but they actually, what the people at Top Gun do is they go back and they train their squadrons, right? It is training the trainer, and to get the best practices out there. Why don't we teach these things in high school? I mean, why are we doing that? It seems so basic.
No, I think this gets to a much bigger issue. I will say, fortunately, there has been, I forget the exact numbers, but there's been a huge push across the country over the past few years, across states, to get this into legislation to make it mandatory to at least have an optional personal finance class, if not have to take it while you're in high school. So I think you're getting at a much, much bigger problem.
It's not a problem
But I
that's
will.
specific to the military, as I guess is what we're agreeing.
Right, right.
Hey, so you've been doing some pilot programs. Maybe this is something new, some pilot programs with some special forces and maybe some other units. What's going on? What can you share?
Yeah, so we have been doing a few pilots, a couple with a special forces schoolhouse, one with just a conventional Army infantry battalion, and the whole purpose behind these is we want to make sure what we're doing is helpful. So we've been around for almost 4 years, and for the first kind of three of those, it's just about getting leaders the tools they needed. And we would get anecdotal evidence. Oh, this was so helpful. Oh, like, oh, please, like, here's a testimonial. Oh, like, this was great. And while phenomenal, we were like, okay, like, we want to be data driven. We want to understand exactly if this is working, where it's working well, where it could be doing better, all those things. So we were fortunate enough to partner with a third party researcher. The kind of the leading expert in the field. He was formerly at West Point, now he's at William and Mary. And what we've done is we've held these pilots. They're usually about 2 to 3 months in length. During them, the unit identifies trainers that they want, and then we arm them with everything they need to teach 3 classes: budgeting, TSP, and investing. And what we found with all 3 of them is that the results have been phenomenal. For example, I'll share with the last one we did with the Special Forces Schoolhouse is they had a 13% increase in financial readiness, 18% increase in financial literacy, 8% increase in financial health, improvements in all measured categories, statistically significant improvements in all measured categories. And
All right, I
you
got to
can be
stop
like,
you
okay,
right there. How do you measure an improvement in financial literacy? What's the numerator and denominator, so to speak?
yeah. So what we do for the pilots is before the unit will pick its trainers, and it'll also pick a treatment group, people who are going to receive the courses, and then a control group, people who are not going to receive the
Got
courses.
it.
And before we give them access to anything, we have them do a survey on the front end, and we capture, okay, here are the results for the treatment group and the control group, and they're usually pretty much the same. And then the treatment group gets access to the tools, the leaders lead, and on the back end, they finish all the courses, and then we do a post pilot survey sometime later. And then what we do is we are able to compare post versus pre for treatment versus control, and we can identify, okay, how much better off is the treatment group, and is it a statistically significant change? Is it a change that is unlikely to be because of just random variation, or is it because because of the effects of the treatment?
4 years of doing this, gaining momentum now. Do you keep track of how many people you've trained so far, that sort of thing, and what you think you'll do for the next year here?
We do. I will say it is very hard to project
Uh-huh.
because it's all about working with the military. But to date, we've worked with over 500 military leaders to teach an approximate over 5,000 service members, and that's from all branches. And in the next year, we are focusing more and more on these pilots because we get data and we have exact numbers of how many people are taught. So for example, for that Special Forces one, there were 150 service members who were part of that treatment group, right? For the one with the infantry battalion, that was about 50 service members. So this year, we hope that we'll be doing about 12 pilots, and that on average, those will have about 100 each, and so on and so forth. So we think 12 pilots, 12 different units, about 1,500 soldiers, probably. Yeah, go.
I
It
mean, I
can get a
really think
little
you're onto
murky.
something here. You do the financial wellness, and it just trickles into other things. They're more focused because they're not worried about problems at home, that sort of thing. I can't even imagine. There probably are service members that are contemplating suicide because of financial problems, that sort of thing. All of these things are sort of correlated. Where do you think you're going to go from here? What's the big thrust for the company for the next year?
Our goal is to get these tools into the hands of as many units as possible. What we really want to do is provide commanders tools for them to stand up commanders programs, right? We think that the best way to solve the military's personal finance problem, which is our mission, is to make it something that military leaders own. We have seen over the past decade that bringing in contractors can be helpful and can have some marginal improvements, but the real way we think to do it is to enable leaders to do it. So what we want to do is work with as many military units as possible. What we'd love to do is work with all of DoD to get them these tools. And to your point, just to add one more thing about the pilots is, money is really kind of that bedrock for so many other things, right? We know that when service members are more financially secure, there's less issues at home, there's less issues with food insecurity, stress, there's less security clearance, revocations, less missed work time. There's more productivity, there's more retention, which is a big problem right now. There's just more readiness. And so, for example, even with special forces, right? And these are the men and women who are usually a little bit older, have a little bit more of a firm financial footing, and usually are, pretty capable individuals. Even with them, the 149 treatment group members of the last pilot we did have the projected 1-year impact of just the 3 courses that were taught for those 149 people is over $330,000 of increased net worth. And what that means is more service members who are more secure, and we can see all of the effects of reduced disciplinary issues, more readiness, all of that kind of stuff. So what we want to do is to continue to build the case to Department of Defense of, hey, like there's something here that looks like it's working. Oh, by the way, it's also this is hard to measure, but increasing leadership abilities, it's increasing all these second and third order effects, and we want to work with Department of Defense to get it into the hands of as many units as possible.
Hey, Brendan, how do people get in touch with you, and how do people reach out and find Life Skills for Soldiers?
So we've got a number of channels. By far the most straightforward is just our website, lifeskillsforsoldiers.org. We're also we've got a decent following on Instagram, Life Skills for Soldiers, LinkedIn, Life Skills for Soldiers. And then we're always available to be reached at. You could always email us at info@lifeskillsforsoldiers.org.
This is great stuff, Brendan. Thank you for being on the program. I have a lot of thoughts and other questions I wish we had time to ask, but they're probably things that better served for after we hang up. So anyway, just any last comments, any last things you'd like to share with our listeners today?
I think keeping it in the style of the podcast, I think one thing I've seen in business school with the experience with Life Skills for Soldiers just in general is veterans oftentimes really don't think we're as capable as we really are. And at least for business school, often funnel into a couple of career consulting, banking, all these things, which nothing wrong with that. But I think we undersell ourselves a lot, and I think it's just, I just want to say I appreciate the work that you and others do to help kind of bring this to the forefront and help us all understand just how much we are capable of and the good work that so many of us are doing.
Well, I want you to know I appreciate what you're doing too. You're paying it forward, I think, is the way that I observe it. Hey, you've been listening to the Mission Oriented podcast on the VeteranCrowd Network. My guest has been Brendan Duebner, the founder of Life Skills for Soldiers. We'll put links to all of his web pages, contact information, and social media outlets on the landing page for this broadcast. Thanks so much, Brendan, for being a guest on our program today. I'll throw out an Army Bravo Zulu to you for your performance today. Thanks so much. And that's a wrap.
Thank you for listening to Mission Oriented. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and you won't miss an episode. To learn more about Mission Oriented and the VeteranCrowd Network, visit us at www.veterancrowdnetwork.com.